Mga guro at magulang, ating pagtulungan, kabataan ay turuan natin. Kahit na nasa tahanan, pag-aaral ay tutukan, oras at kasanayan ay ilaan. Sulong edukalidad, bago man ang panahon, ipagpatuloy ating layunin, patatagin ang edukasyon. ETUlay ang gabay sa pagkatuto, ETUlay edukasyon itatawid sa iyo. ETUlay paaralan di lalayo sa iyo. ETUlay sa makabagong panahon, ETUlay para sa kabataang Pilipino. Kayo ba'y may katanungan at hindi maunawaan? Kami ang gabay at tulay na magtuturo sa'yo. Sa tulong ng teknolohiya at maging ng social media, paaralan ay kusang lalapit sa'yo. Sulong edukalidad, supuin maling impormasyon, katotohanan nating ituro, paunlarin ang edukasyon. ETUlay ang gabay sa pagkatuto, ETUlay edukasyon itatawid sa iyo. ETUlay paaralan di lalayo sa iyo. ETUlay sa makabagong panahon, ETUlay para sa kabataang Pilipino. ETUlay ang gabay sa pagkatuto, ETUlay edukasyon itatawid sa iyo. ETUlay paaralan di lalayo sa iyo. ETUlay sa makabagong panahon, ETUlay para sa kabataang Pilipino. ETUlay, ETUlay sa kabataang Pilipino. ETUlay, ETUlay sa kabataang Pilipino. ETUlay, ETUlay sa kabataang Pilipino.
Magandang araw, Sir Wilbur po, at your service. Narito ang ETUlay upang gabayan ka sa inyong pag-aaral upang lubos na maunawaan ang iba't ibang paksa o subject. Ang ETUlay ay isang free online tutorial class na pinangungunahan ng DepEd Educational Technology Unit sa pamumuno ni Undersecretary Elaine Del B. Pascua. Ang programang ito ay hindi lamang para sa mga bata, kundi ito rin ay magsisilbing gabay sa mga magulang at mga guro kung paano nila ituturo o gagabayan sa bawat asignatura ang kanilang mga anak o mga estudyante. Sa kasalukuyan, ang self-learning module mula sa rehiyon ng Calabarzon at kilala sa tawag na pivot ang ginagamit sa ating ETUlay online class. Kaya ano pang hinihintay ninyo? Ihanda na ang inyong mga ballpen o lapis, papel o kwaderno at samahan kaming itulay ang pagkatuto para sa bawat batang Pilipino. Sama-sama tayong magtutulungan para malampasan ang mga hamon sa panahong ito. Halina't matuto kasama ang inyong online tutor sa oras nito.
Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. Kumusta po kayo? Welcome to another online tutorial session ngayong Lunes dito sa ETUlay. Ating pong asignatura ay Physical Science sa Senior High School sa oras na 4 to 4:40. Tutor Lester po, at your service. Today, we are on the third quarter, week number 4. Ang ating po paksa ngayong hapon ay ang polarity of molecules and its properties. Ang module na ating pinagbabatayan ng ating tutorial session ay ang Alternative Delivery Mode module ng Calabarzon. So at the end of this session, you will be able to first define solubility, miscibility, and polarity. Pangalawa, identify the different types of intermolecular forces of attraction. Pangatlo, explain how polarity of molecules is related to its properties. Magsisimula po muna tayo sa isang pretest na may 10 katanungan po lamang. Ang pretest na ito ay sumusuri po sa inyong prior knowledge ukol sa ating paksa ngayong hapon. Piliin lamang po ang tamang sagot sa pagpipilian. Simulan po natin sa unang katanungan. Which of the following is true of polar molecules? Have high boiling point, have high melting point, low surface tension, high vapor pressure. A, 1 only. 2, 1 and 2 only. C, 1 and 3 only. D, 4 only. Ang tamang sagot po ay one and 2 only. Pangalawa, which of the following intermolecular forces of attraction is arranged from strongest to weakest? A, H bonding, dipole to dipole, London forces. B, London forces, dipole to dipole, H bonding. C, dipole to dipole, London forces, H bonding. And D, H bonding, London forces, dipole to dipole. Ang tamang sagot po ay A, H bonding, dipole to dipole, London forces. Number 3 refers to the resistance of a liquid to flow. A, boiling point. B, solubility. C, viscosity. D, vapor pressure. Ang tamang sagot po ay C, viscosity. Number 4 is temperature at which the liquid starts to boil. Boiling point. B, solubility. C, viscosity. D, vapor pressure. Ang tamang sagot po ay A, boiling point. 5. Define as the pressure exerted by a substance when in its gaseous state. A, boiling point. B, solubility. C, viscosity. D, vapor pressure. Ang tamang sagot po ay D, vapor pressure. 6. The ability of a substance to be dissolved in another substance to form a solution. A, boiling point. B, solubility. C, viscosity. D, vapor pressure. Ang tamang sagot po ay B, solubility. Pang-7. The following are examples of viscous substance except A, blood. B, honey. C, vinegar. D, syrup. Tamang sagot po ay C, vinegar. Which of the following is not true about water? A, has high surface tension. B, has high boiling point. C, has low viscosity. D, becomes denser when freezes. Ang tamang sagot po ay D, becomes denser when freezes. Number 9, the floating ice on liquid water is an indication that ice has a higher density than liquid water. True or false? Tamang sagot po ay false. Okay, last question. The volatility of a substance depends on its vapor pressure. True or false? Tamang sagot po ay okay, true. Right? Noong nakarang linggo, ang paksa na tinalakay natin dito sa ating ETUlay session ay ang polarity of molecules na kung saan may iba't ibang paraan kung paano natin matutukoy kung ito ay polar o non-polar. Ang polarity ng molecule ay isa sa mga dahilan kung bakit natutunaw kapag nalalagyan ng tubig o likido o solubility. Naghahalo ang mga substances kapag pinagsama-sama o miscibility. So let us discuss solubility in a much detailed way. So when we speak of solubility, ibig sabihin po ay maaari pong tunawin ang isang bagay kapag nilagyan ito ng solvent, gaya ng tubig. So let us say for example, ang asukal at tubig kapag pinagsama ay ano pong nangyayari? Natutunaw po ba ang asukal sa tubig? Ang sagot po, isang malaking oo po. Ang miscibility naman ay ang kakayahan ng dalawang likido na pagsamahin. Para mas maintindihan po natin, gawin po nating halimbawa ang tubig. Pwede po ba natin paghaluin ang tubig mula sa iba't ibang lalagyan o bote? Puro lang po ba tubig ang ating nakikita kapag pinaghalo natin ang iba't ibang tubig na galing sa iba't ibang bote? Ang sagot po, isa pong malaking oo. Ang iba't ibang uri ng mantika kapag pinaghalo natin sa isang bote, pareho bang mantika ang makikita natin sa loob ng bote? Sagot po, isa pong malaking oo. Ang tubig naman at mantika kapag pinaghalo natin sa isang bote, puro tubig ba ang ating makikita o puro mantika na lang? At sigurado po, alam niyo po ang sagot po dyan. So, hindi po naghahalo ang tubig at mantika. Kahit pa i-shake natin yung bote na pinaglagyan, maghihiwalay din po ang tubig at ang mantika. So, oil and water are never miscible. So, in terms of solubility and miscibility, maaari lamang matunaw o maihalo ang mga substances kapag pareho silang polar o non-polar. So gaya ng nababasa nyo po sa ating pong slide, so only polar substances will be dissolved or mixed with polar substances. So non-polar substances will only be dissolved or mixed with non-polar substances. So we will use these different examples para mas maintindihan natin kung ano ang pwedeng matunaw at maghalo at kung ano ang hindi. Sa 5 examples na ating ibibigay, alin po ang maaring maghalo kapag pinagsama? Okay, so we have here water and chloroform, benzene and chloroform, water and vinegar, acetone and toluene, carbon tetrachloride, and water. So ating pong basahin muli ang general rule of solubility and miscibility. Polar substances will only be dissolved or mixed with polar substances. non-polar substances will only be dissolved or mixed with polar substances. So, simulan po natin sa water at chloroform. Alright. So, base sa nakaraang topic po natin, ano po ang water? Is it polar or non-polar? Okay, tama po. Water is a polar molecule or a polar substance. How about chloroform? So, basing on its molecular geometry, chloroform is non-polar. At ayon po sa ating general rule of solubility and miscibility, dahil ang tubig po ay polar at ang chloroform po naman ay non-polar, so ano po ang mangyayari kapag pinaghalo po natin ang dalawa? Maghahalo po ba sila o hindi? So, ang sagot po ay isang malaking hindi. So, water and chloroform are immiscible. So, hindi po sila pwedeng maghalo. How about benzene and chloroform? So, right. So, ano po ang benzene? Is it polar or non-polar? So, ang benzene po ay isang non-polar substance. Ang chloroform po naman, of course, non-polar. Dahil pareho po silang non-polar, maghahalo po ba silang dalawa kapag pinagsama? Ang sagot po, yes. Wait, maghahalo po ang dalawa. So, benzene and chloroform are miscible. So, pwede silang paghaluin. How about water and vinegar? So, alam na alam po natin that water is a polar substance. How about vinegar? Vinegar, on the other hand, is also a polar substance. So, dahil pareho silang polar, ay pwede po silang paghaluin. So, water and vinegar are miscible. So, how about acetone and toluene? So, acetone is a polar substance. Toluene, on the other hand, is non-polar. So, based on the general rule of solubility and miscibility, acetone and toluene are immiscible. So, hindi po sila pwedeng paghaluin. So, for carbon tetrachloride and water, so looking at the molecular structure of carbon tetrachloride is a non-polar molecule. And as for we all know, ang tubig po ay isang polar substance. So, ang carbon tetrachloride at water kapag pinagsama ay hindi po sila maghahalo. So, these are immiscible. Right? So, at this segment, we proceed to the intermolecular forces of attraction or the IMFA or IMFA, which exists between the molecules. So in this slide po, we have several types of intermolecular forces of attraction that we had ranked from the strongest one to the weakest one through this inverted pyramid. So in our inverted pyramid, we have ion to dipole as the strongest intermolecular force, followed by hydrogen bonding or H bonding, followed by dipole to dipole, then dipole-induced dipole, and lastly, the weakest of all the forces, the London dispersion forces. So the strength of the intermolecular forces of attraction greatly affects the physical properties of these substances. So ano pong mga physical properties ang maaring maapektuhan depending on the strength of the intermolecular force? So the following properties, okay, we have the boiling point, melting point, vapor pressure, surface tension, volatility, etc. So those are the properties that can be affected depending on the strength of the intermolecular force. So in this table, mababasa po natin dito, we have here the different intermolecular forces of attraction, the interacting substances, and the example. Right, so let's start with ion to dipole intermolecular force. So in ion to dipole, ano po ang mga interacting substances po dito? So we have ion. All right, speaking of ion, the ion can be a cation or a positive ion, or an ion or a negative ion. So this type of intermolecular force exists between an ion and a polar molecule. So halimbawa po dito, okay, sodium chloride or a table salt dissolved in water. Right. So okay, let us try to look kung ano po ang itsura ng ion being interacting with a polar molecule. Right. So this is an example of an ion to dipole interaction. So the ion to dipole interaction is the case for a sodium chloride molecule or a table salt being dissolved in water or asin na natunaw sa tubig. Alright, sodium ion, okay, sodium ion, which is a positive ion, and chlorine, which is a negative ion, is surrounded by water molecules in what we call as hydration. So sodium, okay, sodium, which is a cation, so sodium has a positive charge. So sodium, therefore, is attracted to the negatively charged oxygen. Chlorine, okay, chlorine, on the other hand, which is an ion or a negative ion, is attracted to the positively charged hydrogen. So this action po is an example of the ion to dipole interaction. So ito po ang mangyayari kapag kapag ang asin po ay completely dissolved or natunaw po sa tubig. And this is how table salt will be viewed in the microscopic level. Right? So next in the line is hydrogen bonding. So anong molecules po ang pwedeng mag-exhibit ng hydrogen bonding? So in hydrogen bonding, these are polar molecules that contains hydrogen. And these hydrogen are chemically bonded to a small and highly electronegative atoms such as nitrogen, oxygen, and fluorine. So for examples, we have here water and ammonia. So hydrogen bonding or H bonding is only possible if this hydrogen atom is bonded to either nitrogen, fluorine, or oxygen. So dito po sa example na nakikita nyo po sa inyong mga screen, so we have here the hydrogen, this is water molecules which are attracting each other through hydrogen bonding. So dito po, makikita po natin, oxygen is covalently bonded to two hydrogen. So covalently bonded meaning these are the bonds created by the sharing of electrons. Right. So hydrogen is partially positive, oxygen is partially negative. And because oxygen is partially negative, is attracted to the hydrogen atoms from other water molecule. So this bond is called the hydrogen bond. Right. So ito po ang hydrogen bond na tinatawag po natin. So this hydrogen bond is written by a dotted line. So this bond is created by the virtue of the charge of hydrogen, which is partially positive, and the charge of oxygen, which is partially negative. So this is different to the bond created here by oxygen and hydrogen sharing electrons, as in the case of this water molecule. So as the table shows, hydrogen bonding is the second most strongest intermolecular force. So the third strongest intermolecular force is the dipole-to-dipole. So dipole-to-dipole interaction is only possible for polar molecules. So molecules exhibit the type of interaction between polar molecules is a dipole-to-dipole intermolecular force. So we have here as H2S or hydrogen sulfide and hydrogen chloride as an example. So this is an example of the dipole-to-dipole interaction. So kagaya po ng hydrogen bonding, the dipole-to-dipole interaction is a force of attraction by the virtue of the partial charge of the atom and not by the sharing of electrons. So in this example, we have here the hydrogen chloride molecule, okay, in which the chlorine atom is partially negative and the hydrogen atom is partially positive. So the chlorine atom, which is partially negative, is attracted to the partially positive hydrogen. So this bond is created by the virtue of their charge, not by their shared molecule. Pero bakit nga pala hindi considered na hydrogen bonding itong example na nakikita nyo ngayon sa screen when it involves a hydrogen atom? Okay, bakit po? So once again, hydrogen bonding is only possible if the hydrogen atom is covalently bonded to nitrogen, fluorine, and oxygen. Okay, second to the last, second to the, sorry, second to the last intermolecular force, we have here dipole-induced dipole. So this dipole-induced dipole is an interaction between a polar and non-polar molecule. So this is a dipole-induced dipole. So we have here a polar, okay, we have here a polar molecule, which is water, and a non-polar molecule, which is an oxygen molecule. So the partially negative oxygen in the water molecule, this creates a distortion in the electron cloud of this oxygen molecule. So when there is this distortion in the electron cloud of this oxygen molecule, so this will cause the electrons, okay, the electrons on this side of the molecule to shift slightly away from the oxygen atom in the water molecule. So if the electron shifts away from this oxygen atom here, so this creates a partial positive charge in this oxygen atom. So dahil nag-move away ang electrons, so this creates a temporary positive charge. So creating a temporary dipole. So that's why it is called dipole-induced dipole. So originally this is a non-polar molecule that was given, or this, in which its electron cloud was distorted by this negatively charged oxygen in the water molecule. Right? And last in the list is the London forces. So molecules exhibiting London forces, intermolecular forces of attraction, is for non-polar molecules. So all non-polar molecules and noble gases exhibits London dispersion forces. So example of molecules exhibiting London dispersion forces are the following: oxygen, nitrogen, helium gas, and all the other elements found in the noble group. So in the London dispersion forces, okay, we have here two helium atoms. So sa London dispersion forces, okay, the electron clouds are distorted. So wherein these electrons try to move away from each other. Okay, bakit po? Why do they move away from each other? So ano po ang charge ng electron? So as we all know, the charge of an electron is negative. And because of the repulsive forces between the electrons, so the electron cloud is distorted. So the electrons likely shifts away or tries to move away from each other. And because of this, and because of the slight distortion in the electron cloud, so this portion here becomes temporary positive, as well as this part. So ito dito na side becomes partially positive or temporarily positive, and this side is negative. So this side here is attracted to the temporary positive side of the other helium atom. So remember, these charges are only temporary. So these temporary charges gives the atom its attractive force. That's why it is the weakest among the 5 forces given. Right. So the general property, what are the general properties of polar and nonpolar molecules? So let us differentiate the polar and nonpolar molecules as to the type of the intermolecular force exhibited and the corresponding properties. So polar molecules exhibit hydrogen bonding and dipole-to-dipole intermolecular force of attraction. And because they display stronger intermolecular forces of attraction, so the following properties are associated with the polar molecules. So polar molecules exist as a solid or liquid at a room temperature. Because of the stronger intermolecular force of attraction, polar molecules have a high boiling point, high melting point, high surface tension, low vapor pressure, low volatility, and these are soluble in water. Non-polar molecules, on the other hand, exhibit only London forces, and because nonpolar molecules, intermolecular force of attraction is the weakest of all the intermolecular force. That's why the following properties are associated with nonpolar molecules. So nonpolar molecules exist as gas at room temperature. Okay, they have a very low boiling point, low melting point, low surface tension, high vapor pressure, high volatility, and insoluble in water. So hindi po siya natutunaw sa tubig. So let us define the different properties. So when we say boiling point, so ito po ang temperatura na kung saan magkapareho na ang vapor at atmospheric pressure ng mga liquid substances. So ito po yung temperatura kung saan kumukulo na po yung liquid, as in the case of water. So ang boiling point po ng water, as we all know, is 100 degrees centigrade. Melting point, on the other hand, so ito po yung temperatura na kung saan ang solid ay nagiging liquid o ang solid ay natutunaw. Surface tension, on the other hand, okay, surface tension is the tendency of the liquid to allow a heavier or denser than water objects to float and slide on the water surface without even becoming partly submerged. So, ang halimbawa po nito ay ang karayom na napapalutang po natin sa tubig. So, bakit po lumulutang ang karayom sa tubig? So, that is because of surface tension. Ang viscosity naman, on the other hand, is kung gaano kalapot ang isang liquid. Ang vapor pressure naman po ay related sa volatility ng isang liquid. Ang volatility ay kung gaano kabilis nagiging gas particles ang isang liquid. Alright? So that's all for the properties of the properties related to the polarity of molecules. So we'll have a 5-question assessment lamang po. So let us try if may natutunan po tayo sa ating paksa ngayong hapon. Alright. Which of the following intermolecular force is considered as the weakest? H bonding, ion to dipole, dipole to dipole, London forces. Okay, ang tamang sagot po ay London forces. The boiling point of water is greater than dihydrogen sulfide because A, dipole to dipole bond, B, H bonding, C, London dispersion, D, ion to dipole. Okay, ang tamang sagot po ay letter B, H bonding. So, which of the following substance will dissolve most likely in water? A, oil, B, carbon tetrachloride, C, vinegar, D, hexane. Okay, ang tamang sagot po ay C, vinegar. Right. Alright, so at yan po ang ating tutorial session para sa linggong ito po. So see you po next week, same time, 4 to 4:40 in the afternoon. Binabati ko po lahat ang aking mga kasamahan dito po sa ETUlay National High School, Senior High School Department. So once again, this is your tutor for this segment, Tutor Lester, para sa bata, para sa bayan. Magandang hapon po sa lahat.
Sigurado ako na marami ka na namang natutuhan sa ating ETUlay tutorial session ngayong araw. Tandaan, ito ay hindi lamang para sa ating mga mag-aaral, kundi pati rin sa ating mga minamahal na guro at mga magulang na kaagapay natin para maituloy ang pagkatuto sa kabila ng nararanasang pandemya. Patuloy ding sumubaybay sa DepEd TV para sa mga araling ginawang video episodes. Mapapanood ito mula Lunes hanggang Sabado, alas 7 ng umaga hanggang alas 7 ng gabi sa inyong mga telebisyon. Abangan bukas mula 1:00 ng tanghali ang iba pang aralin sa ating ETUlay free online tutorial session sa English. I-like and subscribe at manatiling nakasubaybay sa ating ETUlay tutorial session sa DepEd Edtech Unit FB page at Educational Technology Unit channel sa YouTube at sa DepEd Tayo at DepEd Philippines social media accounts. Paalam!